Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Ready, Set, Shag. I am here today. As usual, this show is to highlight some people that I have been wanting to speak with, some people I look up to, and generally people I want to get to know. And my guest, of course, is just no exception to the rule. I have been, as just sort of a catch up with everyone, I've been off for a little bit. I'm playing catch up with some people and in communication with everyone. So if you're listening on another platform, thank you everyone for listening after the fact over on Spotify. If you're here on YouTube, thank you so much. Be sure to comment and like the stream while you can. But today I'm speaking with my very own, I guess, my little Hollywood insider here. Kamran Pasha is joining me. I appreciate you joining me tonight. How are you doing, sir?
I'm well. It's an honor to be on your channel. I think it's the first time we've talked, so it's always just great to start a new friendship, new relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. So to give everyone sort of an idea of where you kind of came into my scope was our mutual friend Carrie Smith. I've listened to a few of your conversations regarding you being a Muslim in Hollywood and how you've kind of endured that and how that's been, and then I just kind of am fascinated with it because I'm not a religious person myself. Carrie is one. Her and I have had our own discussions. So that kind of got the ball rolling with me. And then, of course, just knowing that you're in Hollywood and some of the works that you've done, I just thought this would be a great opportunity to speak with you one-on-one. So thank you again.
What it's a delight, and I'm always happy to talk with people with broad range of perspectives. Carrie's a very good friend. I hope she's watching right now. I tagged her on social media. Hope she'll watch it in the replay if she's not watching right now. We're good friends, and she's a devout Christian. I'm a Muslim. We're close. We don't always agree on everything because we're from different religions and different cultures, but we agree on maybe 95% of things. I think she was startled to discover that we don't agree on everything, but that's what happens when you have different perspectives and different faiths. But that's an example of the good that this community can do. That you can build relationships with people of different backgrounds and real friendships. And I've gone out to Texas to see her and meet her husband and go to her home. And so that's the wonderful thing of there's a lot of negatives to the modern social media world, but one of the positives is building new relationships like I'm doing with you, Tom. So
yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's one thing. I think the internet in its current form has been much to humanity's detriment. One of the things that I find is I think people are quite reactionary at times. I don't think it really matters what the subject matter is. It's just Elon has now monetized rage in a way that just allows people to continue to post, rage baiting posts, and that can be difficult. And again, it doesn't matter if
and the flip side of that, and I've got my issues with Elon Musk. I'm not a Musk cultist, right? But the flip side of that is before that there was rage that was being pushed down into not being allowed to express itself. I think personally, the more people are allowed to show their true faces, the more we can see the truth of things, and number one, find out what is the truth or come to an opinion about that, and then find out what people's character is. I think when you suppress conversation, even ugly conversation, you're not able to find out the true nature of things, and that ugly conversation continues on below the surface and festers without having any way to break the echo chamber that's within it. So with Mr. Musk, he certainly opened up certain doors and then closed other doors. Right. I was inexplicably banned from Twitter for no explanation years ago, right? I've been on for 10 years, then one day just got, you violated our policies. And I tried for several years, every few months, asking under the old regime, can you restore me? Can you at least tell me what I did? Can you show me a post that was wrong? No response. Know anything. And then Musk came, and I thought, okay, well, this guy's gonna put me back. He didn't bring me back. Actually, after Musk came on, I tried yet again to restore myself to Twitter. And this time, instead of the standard, I would get a standard automated response every time saying, we've looked into it and you violated whatever the codes are, but we're not going to tell you what that was. And good luck to you. But finally, I got a new message this time after Musk came on saying, we're not going to stop emailing us. We're not going to restore your account.
Wow.
That was a new message. And that's under Elon Musk. So, not everyone is happy with, the people that he's boasting now. So the world we're living in is still very much a world of oligarchs.
Yeah.
And oligarchs control the information. And so that's the evolutionary stage we're in right now of the internet. We're not yet in that idealized stage where every human being has a voice kind of thing. That's just not true, right?
That's true.
And maybe it'll never be true.
Do you one thing I wanted to kind of start off with is with you in particular is how you've approached like your social media, in that like I know you've had and you've been a part of small channels through YouTube. You've
I've been part of big channels too, but they don't want me
Right.
on anymore. We can talk about that. We can talk about why that happened. Yeah.
No, and but I really like when people who have a place in entertainment, who have broader audiences, are supportive of people who don't yet have the voice. Like, I think my friend Mad Keysmo, he had reached out to me and said, I'm really glad you're talking to Cameron, because he was on my show when I was a nobody. And he's like, I didn't even have 100 subs. And I just thought, and I didn't realize that. And I thought that was a really cool thing, because it's not something that is done often in the entertainment commentary space. A lot of times like different crowds and everything can gatekeep information or clout or whatever it might, however you want to put it. So I find it to be a relief that you're willing to do that. Could you tell me why, like, that's something that you do and not?
Well, when I started off, let me just go back on of how I got into some of these YouTube conversations, and it's actually, I was just another guy in the industry working just like everybody else, trying to make it. And then, after, it was really all the anger over Star Wars that got me started watching YouTube, because I was like, I watched that terrible movie, The Last Jedi, and I thought, this is the worst movie I've ever seen. Am I crazy? I mean, I work in this industry professionally, but this is the worst movie I've ever seen. And am I out of my mind? Am I crazy? And then I started going to YouTube, and a lot of other people shared, agreed with me. And then I started watching all these videos. And after a year or so of watching these videos, I would often be in the comments of these videos saying, I work in the industry, and this, and eventually, somebody responded, you work in the industry, why don't you come onto my channel and talk, right? I was like, oh, okay, sure. And that's how I started being invited. Initially, everyone was a small channel, right? Initially, everyone, was trying to figure it out and where are they going and all that, right? And so that it later, some of them solidified. And because I think I just started off, like, anybody wanted to hear my opinion, I was happy to go on. And then I started, like everyone else, I started gravitating towards the larger ones because they were getting so much attention, right? But then eventually those larger ones, have a monetary, the dark side of their successes, they became invested in keeping certain narratives as this is what this channel is going to say and this is what's not allowed on this channel. And me being, I believe, a truth speaker, or at least someone who speaks honestly about what he believes, even if it may or may not be true, it's just what I believe. I will always say that. And then when it became unwelcome on the limits of those channels' conversations, I stopped being invited there. But it's the smaller channels that still want me on, even if they don't agree with me, because number one, they want the engagement. Number two, they're just delighted to have somebody talking to them, and that's where I'm welcome. Now I'm happy to go where I'm welcome.
No, that's cool, and I think, and I see that happen with bigger channels, and I understand the game that's played. I don't, it's not just YouTube; it's every business that you have a business model, you have a product that you have to uphold, and if you deviate from that, it can cost you. It can hurt the bottom line. So I get it.
If that is your model, like, I don't approach my own thing to this as a business model. I have, I'm making money on a portion of this. I have a Patreon, which I'd be happy to promote. There are people from my Patreon, I think, watching right now on the channel because I promoted it, and I'm happy. I make money on that Patreon. I'm happy to promote it. But what I've tried to do, and hopefully I've been successful on that, is I try to always say, these are my opinions. They're not necessarily going to be what you, the subscriber, agrees with, but let's talk it out here. And as long as you're respectful, I try to keep everyone there, right? And so that's been my model. And, there's still times when people get upset. I've tried to avoid talking about the current war in the Middle East, but every now and then you have to talk about it because Hollywood is talking about it, and then that upsets people. But I still try to keep it. It's like, guys, these are my opinions. I'm going to try to let you be safe to express your disagreement with me. Doesn't mean I'm going to not respond when I don't agree with something in the comments, but I'm trying to create that business model of let's actually have an open conversation here, rather than I need a narrative, to keep this going. Because if my Patreon channel started with the same complaints about where Hollywood is culturally, socially, economically, kinds of movies are making, but I've been consistently saying it's getting better and things are changing, and movies that a lot of people in the YouTube world didn't like Barbie, that I really liked, and I thought were changed from the system, I promoted, and that made people leave my Patreon. But I'm like, well, you know what? I'm just going to keep being honest, and then them. And I think that's the right way to approach any business model, is to be honest and have your integrity, and the good customer will come back.
Yeah, I agree. The hardest part about this whole content creation business is sticking to what you believe, because after a while your crowd, like if you're talking about Star Wars and saying this particular movie I don't like, and you make a bunch of movies and it does really well for you and you get an audience from it, then you're sort of beholden to that crowd. And if the next Star Wars product that comes out you like, then all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, you're supposed to say you don't like this. I'm here because you don't like Star Wars. And then that's the hardest part of it. And then it doesn't matter the opinion, whether you're talking about politics, whether you're talking about culture, all that stuff. You can't celebrate something if you've already made money in a crowd bashing it.
Well, if you care about keeping that crowd that's going to be upset,
right.
If you're willing to sacrifice the people that won't tolerate deviation from a line, then you're going to be fine. It's going to mean you're going to take a hit, but over time you'll be replaced by people with integrity. Integrity does not mean agreement. It means willingness to accept your integrity.
Right. No, and that's a good point. I think that it's something that people miss, and I've said this a lot when it comes to how I approach YouTube is I'm looking at this in a longer term. I'm not thinking short term. If I thought short term, I'd comment on every single thing that comes down the road. I'd get mad at everything, but I don't have the energy to do that. And I'd rather think something out and give you my full thought on it. And I could be wrong. You know what I mean? I could be totally wrong about something based on a few news articles, but I've taken time.
And I've been wrong. See, one of the most important things I think is part of keeping your integrity is I've kept most of my, most of the Patreon articles that I've written, I've kept, and some of them show that I predicted things incorrectly. Right. And I've left them there. I mean, I'm tempted, why don't I just erase that? Because it's kind of embarrassing that I said this was going to happen. It didn't happen that way. Right. But I kept them there. I was like, here's a history of how my thought evolved. And you'll see when here's where things are going now. And that, unfortunately, a lot of where this community has gotten to, as in the YouTube social media community, is an unwillingness to admit mistakes. Right. It's because that fear of, if I admit I made a mistake, I'm going to lose my subscribers who want me to be Superman. And if anyone can't handle you being wrong about something, I mean, that's a crazy person. Do you really want them? Do you want to be beholden to that?
Right. That's on them, not you necessarily. And so I don't want to get too far ahead, because YouTube for you is kind of after the fact. You established yourself in Hollywood before YouTube, and with shows like Nikita, Kings, Sleeper
Roswell,
Cell.
New Mexico was my most recent one. Yes, on CW. Right. Yeah.
So kind of give us a quick walkthrough, and for people who might not be familiar with you, where, how you get yourself into that and then find your way into Hollywood.
Sure. Well, I'll make it very brief. So I'm an improbable person to enter Hollywood. I'm not in any way like most of my peers. I was born in Pakistan. I immigrated to the United States when I was 3 years old, became a U.S. citizen, and I went off to do other things. I was a journalist for a few years. I went to law school, went to business school. I was going to be in a very different path, a corporate path, right? Working for a big corporate law firm, that kind of thing. That was where I was going. And then in business school, while I was doing my MBA, I just got bored. And to pass the time, I'd always been a writer. I'd been a journalist, and I wrote creative stuff for myself, never really trying to publish it. But I just passed the time. I wrote during the time of business school where I wasn't kind of, excited about my accounting classes. I wrote a teen horror movie to just, entertain myself, right? I got a book on how to write scripts, and I wrote a teen horror movie. And then I graduated, and I was working at a big New York law firm, and I was still I don't know if this is what I want to do with my life, but I got all the student debt, and I'm kind of trapped in it now. I guess this is where I'm going, right? But then I have this script I wrote in school. What do I do with it, right? So I did the worst possible thing you can do. The best way to enter Hollywood is you're Steven Spielberg's, kid's best friend. I mean, that's the best way, right? But I wasn't that guy. I didn't know anyone. And so I'm like, I got a script. So I just randomly, unsolicited, sent my script to agencies. Like, hey, this is me. You don't know who I am. Here's my script. You want to read it? And, vast majority of people didn't respond or sent me immediate rejection letters. And that was it. And then, but months after I did that, when I got no traction, I gave up on it and forgot about it. And then months later, one agent actually bothered to read it. And he called me. He's like, this is a really good script. Who are you? He's like, I don't know why. I just randomly picked up my script from my garbage pile of unsolicited scripts that I normally just burn at the end of the day, right? But I picked yours up and I read it. And I was like, this is it was a teen slasher, right? It was like Scream. Scream was big at the time, right? So it was modeled on Scream. And so, the hot girl running up the stairs with the dude with a mask chasing. I mean, that's the kind of thing I wrote. But he's like, this is a really good version of that kind of thing. And so he ended up representing me. And then suddenly I wrote scripts. I was like, wow, I got an agent. Somebody wants to represent me. And I wrote and he sold them to Paramount. And I suddenly got these huge checks. I was like, are you kidding me? I mean, I got these massive checks. And I was like, suddenly inducted into the guild by accident because for Paramount to buy these scripts that I'd written, they'd have to make me a member of the Writers Guild. So it's called Taft-Hartley. And I was Taft-Hartley'd in. So suddenly I'm getting a letter from the Writers Guild. Well, you're now officially a Writers Guild member. So I'm like, wait, did I just become a professional screenwriter? How did this happen? And so, I was like, wow, maybe this is my destiny. And so I quit my job and I moved to LA and discovered selling the third script wasn't that easy, right? You got your beginner's luck. And then I'm like struggling and I still have all the student debt from law school and business school. And I'm like, oh, I'm not getting work. What am I doing? But I survived that. I got my first break on TV I was a staff writer on the Twilight Zone on what was then UPN, which was then later absorbed into when UPN and the WB came together to form the CW, right? So that was with Forrest Whitaker was playing the Rod Serling host, and that was my first break. I was a staff writer on that show. They actually did some pretty good shows. If you can get on DVD, I still get a few cent residuals every quarter because somebody's watching that show from 20 years ago. And but then my big break happened in 2000. So that was in 2000, and I moved to LA in 2001. 2002, I had my big break in moving in as a full-time writer into the Twilight Zone. And then, after that, 2003, didn't get work after that. And I struggled for 2 years to pay the bills to survive. And then 2 years later, when I'm about to give up and I had no money left, it's always like that kind of thing. I got my next big break, which proved to be the big break. There was a show on Showtime called Sleeper Cell, which is about a Muslim who's an FBI agent who infiltrates an Al-Qaeda terror cell to defeat them. And at the time, at 24 was the big show worldwide, and very cartoonish understanding of the quote unquote war on terror. The Iraq War was at its height, right? Yep. And so my show came out, and that was. It got a lot of the New York Times wrote about it. It became a big thing, right? A bunch of Golden Globe and Emmy nominations. It's like the first time you see a Muslim hero, at the height of the war on terror. And so suddenly people were like, who's this guy? Who's this new writer on this show, Muslim guy? So I started getting a lot of attention, and that launched my career, and I worked on shows like Kings and Bionic Woman at NBC. And then I ended up doing a lot for the CW, as you mentioned, Nikita, Rain, which is the Married Queen of Scots show. I did Roswell, New Mexico. So I've worked a lot for the CW, which sadly is essentially no longer a network. I mean, it's basically just repackaging Canadian shows at this point, right? But at the time, it was the CW, at least until last year, was one of the more important networks in keeping people employed. And now that that's imploded, it's one of the main reasons people are not employed right now. But yeah, so I've been around. I've sold a bunch of movies that are still to be made. First movie I sold was the love story of the Taj Mahal, big epic romance, modeled on gladiators about the Mughal Empire and the prince and the princess who fell in love and their forbidden love, and she died, and he built a Taj Mahal to remember her, right? I mean, so that kind of, and I sold it to Warner Brothers, and it still sits there in their library unmade. Every year someone comes to me and says, I'd love to resurrect, because it's a great script. I think so. People don't. And literally every year someone comes to me and says, can I resurrect that? I'm like, yeah, you have to make a deal with Warner Brothers. You can buy the script from them or at least partner with them. And then every year it never quite comes together. So, but I'm used to it. Literally somebody 2 weeks ago, I was meeting. They're like, hey, weren't you the guy that wrote that? I mean, literally it's a 20-year-old script. And they're like, weren't you the guy that wrote that Taj Mahal script? That's the best thing I've ever read. I was like, yeah, I'm that guy. Literally, that was the guy. He's like, what are you doing with it? I'm like, it just sits there at Warner Brothers. You want to try? So he's off trying now. So every year it's a new person, right? And so that's the weirdness of the artist journey, right? It's unpredictable. The other things I was mentioning is that the other big breaks that I had was, I sold 2 novels to Simon & Schuster that are published. They're both historical epic novels. They're both based on screenplays that I wrote, that I novelized. The first is called Mother of the Believers, and it's a novel about the wife of the Prophet Muhammad. Her name was Aisha, and it tells the story of the rise of Islam from her point of view as a novel. Second one is a novel on Saladin, the Muslim Sultan, versus Richard the Lionheart in the Third Crusade, sort of the sequel story to Kingdom of Heaven that Ridley Scott did, right? And and I've got my third novel, which I'm hoping to publish. I'm putting it out on my Patreon chapter by chapter every month. And so if there's any, I know there's Patreon members in the chat right now. I know a few of you read the novel, so mention the chat if you like it. I think you do. So yeah. But the third novel will be interesting because it's a little unusual. It's actually a Jewish tale written by a Muslim guy. It's the story of Esther from the Bible. It's called The Queen of Persia, and it's about a Jewish girl who takes on essentially a false identity to become a princess in Iran, and ends up marrying the ancient Persian king and becoming the queen, and then fights off these bad guys who are trying to destroy her people in Iran. And I wanted to, it's a great story, and I wanted to see, can a Muslim guy completely tell a Jewish tale authentically? And I think I did. And I think part of what I do in my career is to shake people up and say, well, because this industry has been about, you can't write that.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to write that. Only before, white people wrote everything, and
right.
Now it's like only a black person can write a black person, and only a Chinese person can write a Chinese person. And if we can't find the right Chinese person, guess what? We're just not going to make the movie. It's a great way for racists to get projects out, right? Well, we can't find the right black writer, so we're just not going to make that movie, right? Yeah. Instead of finding a white writer or a Pakistani writer or Asian writer who nails it and then makes the movie, they're like, well, we can't find the right black writer. We're not going to. Right now, it's happening right now with I try to, and I'm hoping I can resurrect it. There's Sony announced 2 years ago that it was doing a young Malcolm X series. And Malcolm X is one of my personal heroes. He really molded who I am as a human being, and based on children's novels written by his daughter, one of his daughters, and daughter through Facebook, and I said, your father is a huge influence in my life. I'd love to be the guy to turn the show on. But Sony's like, well, you're brown, but you're not black. You're not African American, so you're not the right guy for this. And so they found some young writer who was, I guess, appropriate for what they wanted. Show never got made.
It's wild because that is one thing I've seen, as someone who's not like really plugged into any necessary like industry, you're just seeing so much of meritocracy go out the window in favor of just, oh, hey, you just don't look the part. You don't look like the person that we need. We don't care what your expertise is in this. Right. We need to check a box, and you don't fill that box. And it's just not much. Like, you could have all the knowledge in the world and be the perfect guy to write it, but they don't care because you're not the right shade of brown.
Yeah.
Which,
and it's wild. I mean, the tragedy is the intention, as always, the intention behind all these things is good. It's just the action doesn't work, right? So the intention behind all of this was that, that people, that the claim was that stories were not authentically being told by people not from the culture. And one can argue that, is that true? Is that not true? But what is very clear is if it doesn't get made at all, who's benefiting? Who's benefiting?
Right.
Nobody's benefiting.
Yeah.
So the story gets lost.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think there are times where you want someone from a particular culture, whether it's consulting or being like firsthand involved with the creation of a story, because they might have nuance that someone like, even someone who's really great at writing, they might not just be able to bring that edge to the story. Like you're Muslim, so you might have some knowledge of that culture that someone who even a historian just doesn't quite have, because they're not living it.
I'll give you an example, Tom. How did I get my job on Sleeper Cell? I'll tell you, right? So I didn't create the show. To these very, bright and successful writers, Ethan Rip and Cyrus Voris created the show, right? And they're not Muslim, and they interviewed me, and they interviewed a bunch of people for a job on the show when Sleeper Cell was greenlit by Showtime in 2005, and they're like, wait a minute, you're Muslim? You're actually Muslim? Because at the time they hadn't really met anyone. And they're like, really? You really are? I was like, yeah. And I actually gave them a critique on their pilot script, which was a very good pilot script. But I said, there are certain errors Islamically that you wouldn't be familiar with. And they said, well, give us an example. And I gave them a funny example, but it's a true example. There's a scene in the script where and in the filmed pilot, like I saw the final film pilot, and I wasn't there when it was filmed, so there are things I was like, well, that isn't true. And so one of the scenes is you've got the hero Darwin El Said, who's the African American FBI agent. It's a scene where they're talking in a men's room with one of the terrorists, right? The member of the cell who doesn't know he's FBI, like, wise guy, right inside the thing. And they're in the bathroom, and they're both standing at urinals peeing while they're talking to each other. And I said to them, you guys don't know this. You're not going to find this in the introductory to Islam books that you read and all the books you read. But religious Muslim men do not like urinating standing up because the Prophet found it unclean. It splashes all over your body. So Muslim men are told that the proper thing to do is to sit on the toilet seat but do not stand urinating. My mosque here in Culver City has a sign in the bathroom that says, please do not urinate standing. It actually has a sign saying it is against the custom of the Prophet to do that. It has a sign because a lot of people, especially new converts, may not know that, right? And but where are you going to find that? You're going to find that in any intro to Islam book. You have to live this thing to know how people urinate in the bathroom, because that's just not a topic that's going to be in any kind of academic book that you can read. You can read 100 of them, and it's never there because people don't talk about bathroom habits generally, unless you're in some complex anthropological study, and most people ain't going to read that, right? So that was how I got the job. They're like, well, if this guy knows this level of detail, of authenticity, right? And that was fair because I was like, that's not right. And they had the humility to go, you know what? You're right. We didn't know that. Maybe you'd be helpful on our show. Join it.
That's awesome. Do you think that level of detail is something that has been lost in Hollywood in general? And do you think it's like, I enjoy that level of nuance, but some people might find it a bit much. So do you think it's important to have that level of detail when writing scripts?
Well, I think we'll look at a perfect example. Did you see the Shogun recently? FX's Shogun?
I watched the first episode the other night. Loved it. I can't wait to get into it.
Watch it. I won't reveal the things. It's one of the best things I've seen in years. It's the best show on television right now. Mm-hmm. And as you'll get into it, and you saw it in the pilot, the level of detail is stunning, right? Yeah. You feel that you are in 16th century Japan, right? Yeah. It comes down to the way the women are walking. As Anna Swai, plays the stunningly beautiful Mariko, who's the star who's the female lead of the show, she explained it took her months to learn how to do the proper Japanese woman walk because they wore a certain kind of undergarment that made it difficult for them to walk without exposing themselves. So they had to walk very carefully so that they wouldn't expose themselves in the kimono, right? And that she had to learn how to do that. That's the level of detail that show put into. Right, because again, it's Japanese people who largely read. The gentleman playing the Shogun is the executive producer, and he said, "This is the level of detail we're going to get." And as you're going to watch the series, it's breathtaking because you feel like these little things, how they're holding the chopsticks, the little stuff you learn. You're like, okay, I'm in this world, and that's what made it come alive. I probably saw the Shogun, the original miniseries from the 80s with Richard Chamberlain when I was a kid. I don't recall that it was that level of detail. And that's where I think the best example of diversity. Here you have a almost completely Japanese acting troupe, right? With a couple of European white actors, and almost 90% of the dialogue is in Japanese and subtitled, and you're with it the whole time. And that's where I think storytelling should be going. That's authenticity.
Well, and there's the other thing with that show is I read an article, or I saw a headline rather. I didn't quite read I didn't read the article yet, but they were talking about how some people were disappointed that there wasn't a season 2 for Shogun, and even though they had covered the book it was based on, and that was it. And it's a miniseries. It's meant to be. Right. Yeah. And so my question to you is, do you think a way to solve, I think, some of the issues that Hollywood is having right now is maybe more miniseries with an attention to detail, especially with things that might dabble in historical significance, or just in general, painting the world, right? If you're world building, it's probably important to really set the stage. As an example, Fallout, I thought was a great show, but I thought they missed a little bit on the world building. I think they gave video game lovers a few member berries that helped, and like, hey, here, this is from the game. You guys remember this?
Mhm.
But they were, if it were someone who has never played a Fallout game, they might not fully understand like what is this suit of armor this guy is wearing, or what is this suit these people like. The world building and attention to detail wasn't quite there the way Shogun is. Do you think it's important to maybe return to something like that, the mini series with a little bit more detail?
Well, I think the current economics of Hollywood are going to force miniseries for a while, and that's a good thing, because we've been pushing this direction, because we've had, unfortunately, the streaming wars, Netflix and these other streamers, especially Netflix. Their business model was incentivized to bring new subscribers in rather than retain the current subscribers, and so that's why Netflix, unfortunately, has a long history of canceling shows after one season or two seasons. Marco Polo, which was its effort to do an Asian epic series, right, was canceled after two seasons. I have good friends of mine that I've worked with that wrote the third season. There is a third season of Marco Polo that was never filmed, because after they finished writing the entire season, they got the word the show's been canceled. We're not going to film the third season, right? And that's a disappointment to people that like Marco Polo. And by the way, the third season, from I can tell you because it's not going to happen. The third season was going to culminate in the failed Mongol invasion of Japan. Kublai Khan attempted to invade Japan and failed, and his ships were destroyed by a storm. And the final scene, as my friends told me, of the season finale cliffhanger was Marco Polo washes up he's shipwrecked, and he washes up on the shores of Japan, and he gets up and he's stunned as he looked, and there's a line of 10,000 samurai waiting, right?
Wow.
And you just cut to black, right? And that would have been a great show, but Netflix killed it. Netflix killed it. And so unfortunately, the economics of these streamers does not necessarily sustain longer term shows, which is a problem. So a miniseries solves that problem, right? Yeah. A miniseries allows you to have you can get your full season in. And if the show really does have high demand, maybe you can finagle a second miniseries. Like, I don't know that they have any plans to do that with Shogun. I'm not going to reveal how you should watch the whole show. I'm not going to reveal how it ended, but it is certainly possible. If the estate of James Clavell, I'm sure it has something to say about that, the estate of James Clavell allowed it, the author, then there is a future to be seen as to what happens to these people after the miniseries ended. I'm certainly curious, right? What would have happened? And, and we have some legacy for that. We've got, they did some terrible sequels to Gone with the Wind, by the Margaret Mitchell estate approved, horrible books. Gone with the Wind is one of my favorite books of all time. I think it's one of the greatest novels ever written. It's one of the greatest movies ever made. And it was shocking how bad those sequels were that were done in the 80s. But it is possible an estate can permit a sequel and you can continue the story.
Yeah. So what do you like? I guess I should have led with the question of what do you think of the current state of Hollywood? Being someone who's in there and who's worked in Hollywood, what do you mean
by that? That is a loaded question. What do you mean by state? State in what capacity that I can comment on? Culturally, ideologically, in what way? Economically, there's lots of states.
Culturally, where do you think Hollywood is right now? How do you think?
Well, culturally, I mean, I think this is the thing. This is the reason I'm not necessarily welcoming a lot of the bigger YouTube channels anymore, because I think we are no longer where we were 5 years ago, where we were pushing all kinds of extreme ideological positions that weren't even liberal. They were essentially hyper conservative. It's like, with all ideologies, you end up going full circle, right? You end up being so far left, you end up becoming far right, and so that the ideology got so crazy that, women's right went from women in power to women have no definition, right? I mean, that's a full crazy circle, right? So we went to that place, right? And so that's where Hollywood was a few years ago, which is when I joined YouTube to critique a lot of these things, right? Mm-hmm. It's not where it is now, and it's been off of that for a few years, slow. The problem with people don't understand is that movies take a long time to make. So a lot of stuff, even after Hollywood decided we're not doing this crap anymore, they still got to service the crap that's in the pipeline. Stuff that was greenlit and produced and sent into promotion 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it's going to come out. And it's like it's like staring at the stars. You're looking in the past, right? Literally, we talk about Hollywood stars. You're looking at the past. That's done. That's no longer, but they got to put it out there because they got to make money on it somehow, right? They got to cover the cost. And so they got to put it out there. And so people think that a lot of this crap is still quote unquote woke, right? It isn't. Hollywood has more than learned its lesson. I think one of, the turning points were that should have given people awareness that we've turned was example would be Top Gun Maverick and its massive success, and that's old school 1980s patriotic rah jingoistic, guys killing random unknown bad guys. I mean it's a very it's like random mysteriously vaguely communist bad guys. You don't even know who they're shooting at. Well, whatever. It's a 1980s action movie, and so it's great. You got that. The Ghostbusters, the new version, the new sequels are great. They capture the original feeling of the ones certainly different from Ghostbusters 2016, which was part of that effort to deconstruct and mock the past, which didn't work. And then I'm going to say the thing that's controversial, strangely, the pivotal moment that was the end, that marked the end of the woke era of Hollywood, is the one thing that people don't grasp. It was Barbie. Barbie was the signal that woke was over, and unfortunately, a lot of people on YouTube, especially a lot of the loudmouth political commentators, they didn't understand Barbie. Barbie is a satire. It is Blazing Saddles. It is Dr. Strangelove. Yeah, that's what anyone who's watching it is like. This is a movie that is mocking extreme feminism. It's a fantasized world where women dominate men and the men rebel, and then they both learn that maybe this is an unhealthy dynamic. Right. So it's like watching Blazing Saddles and thinking that is an accurate portrayal or what Hollywood wants us to think about black-white relationships. You've got this black sheriff that wants to hook up with white women. I mean, it's mocking sexualized stereotypes of black men, right? And it's mocking what people are saying privately, so we can get past it, right? And that's what Barbie was. And some of the smarter commentators on YouTube, like Ethan Van Sciver, who is an artist by profession and a storyteller, he's very conservative, and he loved Barbie, and he said, he put it out publicly, this is a brilliantly crafted satire and well done. And I put that on my Patreon, and people were shocked. I was like, I've watched that movie now 5 times as a storyteller. People are like, I watched the movie many times, and to me, it's one of the most brilliantly crafted satires in history. And if you got the message. A lot of people didn't want to get the message, but that to me was the nail in the coffin, because of, and if, let's say, our right-wing friends are right, it is not a satire. That's the message they want. Women should dominate men. Ken should be humiliated, right? Right. Okay. Well, then remember the whole mantra that you've been saying, go woke, go broke. Well, that thing made like a $1.5 billion. So if that's woke, they didn't go broke on that. The reason they didn't go broke is people got it. They got it. I'm in the audience. Everyone's laughing. They're getting that this is a joke.
Right. I do think I've always been, or at least I've been in the very recent past 6 months, and realizing like there's a lot going on. And I understand how film is made to the extent that a lot of the stuff we see has been in the pipeline for a while, as you said, and stuff's got to come out. They're not just going to scrap an entire movie. Once it's there, it's coming out. So like, I get that. And then, even looking at something like Barbie, like, cause every other project that came out that was touting ESG and DEI stuff before, like, just fell on its face. None of it made money. No one cared about it.
Because it's lecturing, it's hectoring. Yeah, it's lecturing, it's hectoring. It's people can get when they're being condescended to. Right. And their feelings are being invalidated, that feel that this isn't right. Well, that's when you watch Barbie, you realize every man that feels like he doesn't have a place in this system right now, where men are unimportant, Ken has a voice. They're not invalidating that feeling. They're empowering it. Yeah.
No, and that's what I like. I kind of laughed at it as like is it my favorite movie of the decade? No, but it was a breath of fresh air in an otherwise like really unfunny state of cultural Hollywood. And I just thought, this is really good, and it's a step in the right direction.
Well, you just hit the pivotal thing. Funny, right? Where does humor come from? Humor comes from truth. And so we can laugh when something rings true. The problem with a lot of the dumb woke comedies of the last decade was they weren't funny. Ghostbusters 2016 isn't funny, right? Because they're trying to tell you something rather than you going, oh, somebody said the truth out loud at last. Oh my God, they said it. Oh my God. And you laugh, right? Oh my God. A man, feels completely disempowered in a world where women are the most important thing. Oh, they're saying that. Oh my God, it's so funny, right? Ken is singing this song, expressing his pain, the pain that I feel. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
it's true.
No, yeah, no, it's true. It's one of those things I don't celebrate it as one of my favorite movies of all time, but it's certainly in a sea of crap. It felt like, oh, okay, we're getting somewhere. There's fresher water on the other side, and that's what I want to see from Hollywood. I want to enjoy going to the movies again, and I've said this on my panel show on Wednesday night. I don't want to approach every movie as I have low expectations for this. I don't want to do that. And I do that with movies a lot nowadays. And I think a lot of people do. They're just like, oh, I've got low expectations. And then you go in there and you see,
because there's good movies out there. There's
right.
good
No,
stuff
I agree.
I'm enjoying myself with the movies every week.
No, and that's I'm starting to get back to like seeing movies on a regular basis. And funny enough, I started going back and watching I watched Kill Bill Volume 1 the other night, and I want to make a video about like how perfect that movie is.
That's a superb movie.
And just like Quentin Tarantino's like peak moments in his filmography, just for so many reasons. But like that's the kind of movie I want to see again. But I'm also enjoying a lot of these TV shows, and it was one of the reasons I started getting into film so much was because I was seeing a lot of great storytelling week by week.
Yeah.
And I would love for Hollywood to go back to that model, is not just necessarily the binge model, but give me something to expect each week. It was a way that I could sit down with my dad and my mom every week and say, we're going to watch a new X-Files this week.
Sure.
We're going to watch new, 6 Feet Under.
Which is what we did with Shogun. Like I was visiting my sister in Pennsylvania. Every Tuesday night was Shogun night. We got popcorn, and my sister and my brother-in-law, we got together. We watched Shogun together. It was a family thing. And by the way, the other thing, which people are now realizing, again, I was ahead of the curve. I was telling them at the time, the other show that is that where you gather your family to watch it was the show that a lot of people didn't watch when it came out on Disney Plus, Miss Marvel. It is actually the most family-friendly, family-loving, oriented, conservative show. It feels like you're in the 80s watching Leave It to, Mr. Belvedere or some of those old class Family Ties. It is that kind of sitcom. Miss Marvel, the one about the superhero, the Pakistani superhero. If you haven't watched it, if you have Disney Plus, it's worth watching. I put that on my Patreon. People are like, I don't know, Cameron. And then they watch it like, oh my God, this show is actually family values. Like I watched it with my 80-year-old mom every week. We got our popcorn. My mom and I watched it, and she would tell me this is, oh my God, because there were flashbacks to 1940s India and Pakistan partition, which she endured as a child. So we had this conversation. It was like some of the horrors that we saw because they went back in time to that time period. She's like, yeah, the trains, the murders on the mass murders on the train. So I'm having a bonding thing with my mom, but it's not just for Pakistanis, because again, stupid people on YouTube said it's not made for me. It's made for brown people, made for Pakistanis. No, it's made for everybody, because it's a show about a girl who is obsessed with Comic Cons who suddenly gets superpowers. So any of you Comic Con obsessed people who got superpowers and was a weird, nerdy geek outsider, what would you do in that situation? And you have like overbearing parents who are too loving and won't leave you alone. We all get it. And I haven't seen a show like that in 25 years. So that's an example of people on YouTube dismissed it. You know when they finally rediscovered it? 2 years after dismissing it, when the star of it, when she was out criticizing Hollywood for not being faithful to source material and to the comics. And then like, oh, she's on our side. I was like, she was always on your side. But you guys couldn't accept that a brown Pakistani Muslim girl and a show about her family was about you. And that's your bigotry. It's not anything else.
Yeah, and that's I'll tell you, the one, being someone who's not fully engrossed in the comic book backstory of Miss Marvel, one of the reasons I had because I watched I want to say the first 3 episodes of the show. One of the reasons I had walked away from it was not necessarily that I wouldn't say, oh, it's a girl, I can't, or it's a Pakistani girl. I didn't feel connected in any way. And I could see where you're coming from with those lessons, but it wasn't enough to hold me. And I know the point of the show was to be like campy at times
Yeah.
and kind of, adolescent with its humor.
Mhm.
And that's why I thought like this isn't quite for me. It's not the MCU. It was a different MCU that
Sure,
was
it wasn't.
trying to,
I mean, MCU has always had humor. This was very campy.
yeah.
If you, again, you're free to do it. Not, I would urge you to actually watch it again. Maybe you and I can come. Maybe you and I can come back and do a discussion on it. If you watch the entire season,
Yeah.
maybe you and I can come back and do a discussion on it. And see, because what's surprising is where the show goes. The show becomes much more serious past the first 3 episodes you saw. It becomes much more thoughtful. The characters, especially like the ones you think are superficial, like the pretty redheaded mean girl, they all go in directions you do not expect. They all change in ways you don't expect. And that's the surprising thing. The show ends in a very different place than where it began. So maybe it's, if you're up for watching it in the next few weeks, I'll happy to come back on and discuss what you saw and see if maybe you still have the same opinion, but it would be great to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I'm not opposed to it, because I think sometimes I get ahead of myself with like, this isn't quite where I wanted it to be, but there's definitely a chance that my mind can be changed. That's something that I'm trying to do with everything, is keep my mind open to new ideas and all this, because it's I do like that actress. I thought that she was the best part of the Marvels. Like, I didn't really care much for Brie Larson, or the other woman. I don't know her name.
Yeah.
But but she was the more memorable part of it. I think she's a great actress. But yeah, but it's something that I'm willing to give a shot again. If you insist on.
Well, I don't insist, but I would love to be able to have that conversation, because I think it's still out there, and I think people rediscover it. They I think they'll enjoy it.
Okay. So you had, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was you've talked a lot about Star Wars. You've had a lot of stuff happen with your discussions with how Star Wars has progressed from The Last Jedi on. Now the Acolyte was something that you had commented on for a while that wasn't necessarily going to happen. How do you feel now, seeing that we have a real trailer out for it?
Yeah, a trailer, quote unquote. I mean, it still looks like a teaser, right? There's no information in it, right? I mean, a trailer, you have to actually know what the show's about. We don't know anything, right? So
true. So what I mean, I guess seeing that, like I would say, seeing what I saw, it looks pretty solid that we're gonna get the Acolyte show. How
it's probable. It's not 100% guaranteed. Again, I don't want to get too much into stuff that is not. I've been talking my Patreon that I have certain insiders within Lucasfilm Disney that have been fed me information. There's been a lot of chaos on the Acolyte. I've talked a lot about it on my Patreon. People who want to find out more about it can come join the Patreon and read about what I've said. But there's a lot of stuff going on that isn't your typical TV show. Understand that nothing on that show makes any sense on an objective level, right? The showrunner and Leslie Headland, Harvey Weinstein's assistant, showrunner, basically left last summer before post-production was finished. That's not normal. A showrunner stays. The showrunner is the last person off the boat. There's the captain, right? They stay to the end, right? They stay till distribution. They show up at the premiere, right?
They should.
That's the normal thing. And if they're fired or they quit, they are replaced by someone to do the rest of that. She left by public admission. There's no conspiracy there. She left because we know she was announcing other projects she's supposed to be doing. She's went off to do those things, right? And then nobody was ever announced to replace her. That's not normal. That's not normal business operating procedures, right? And no one has been able to figure out how the show has been financed. No one's can figure it out, and people have done like trying to make sense of where this money is coming from, and no one's been able to put that together, right? And there's different claims. $200 million. I mean, if they had several $100 million, you wouldn't take 2 years to get a teaser trailer that doesn't explain anything, right? So none of the official story around it has never made any sense. It doesn't make any sense. I have explained on my Patreon what I believe is going on based on my sources internally, who have said that it is a project that is, let's just say, it's like He Who Shall Not Be Named. There's people don't talk about it. They're afraid to talk about it because they're afraid that they'll get pulled into its crazy web. And so it is one of those bizarre things where none of it is what it appears to be. And it appears to be because Ms. Headland, she's a very shady figure. When you're Harvey Weinstein's madam, which is what she was booking the She was booking his sessions, right, as his assistant, right? You're not on the up and up. You're somebody that's very much should be, in my opinion, in prison with him, right? And so somebody like that is not a normal person. So what they did there, why they did it, there's no explanation that no one can explain it to me. They can mock me for saying what's coming out. You said it wasn't going to come out, right? But they can't explain the show to me. I mean, they can't explain like how or what's happening with it, right? How come no one, how come Carrie Ann Moss has never talked about it? You'd think that this is her big return to sci-fi. She'd alleged star of the show. She's never given one interview on it. Come on, it's not normal.
Yeah, it is. I will say that, like this show, I've over the past couple of years, we've had different. We've had information come out. This is going to come out. This is going to be a part of it. Yeah. But that there was so little like kind of given to us. Now I know, I know that you get the announcement, you get a teaser, then you get a proper trailer, then it's released. I understand that's sort of the progression.
That's the way. That's how marketing works. Yes.
Right. And but to your point, like the big stars in it, where is their press run? Like what?
There's nothing. The gentleman who won the Oscar, Lee won the Oscar from the Korean show, right? He's there. You don't see him anywhere. You don't see any of these people, right? They're not doing interviews. We're getting press right now about that show with Jude Law that he's doing with the kids, right, in Star Wars. I forget the title of that show, right? Yeah. We're getting press about that. We don't even have a release date on that.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's something not right here. And if people want to go to my Patreon, I've explained based on my sources that the something not right is very shady. It is not a project that has been properly authorized within Disney, but they're kind of trapped with it because the people that are involved in it that Leslie hadn't put them in business with. And now they're just like, let's just put it out and forget about it. And hopefully it'll just go away. Right. But it's something that is very kind of sinister. It's not normal.
Could this be one of those things that's like last remnants of that sort of woke time that like this is a lot of stuff that was on like, I won't say on the cutting room floor, but they're just sort of like piecing things together, scripts that they thought would work. But since they're realizing they're losing money faster than they can bring it in, they're just like, hey, we're going to put this out. Maybe it's a limited, like a very small miniseries. Maybe it's a 4-episode, like,
well, that's what it is now, because my insiders had said last summer that they never had the money for a full show. And they had more than just, a sizzle reel, but they never had the money for a full show. And now that's come out that she herself, Headland, has said, the only one talking about is Headland. No one else is talking about it, right? And other stars. She said, well, it's going to be shorter than normal. It's a shorter run, 4 episodes. It's going to be half hours. Maybe some of them don't even make it to half an hour. It sounds like what my people have said, that this is cobbled together with duct tape. Right. And, my people said Jon Favreau was just horrified by it. He's looked at it. He's like, I want to put this out there. But there are other factors inside of Disney that have nothing to do with ideological politics, but to do with sort of debts owed to sinister people that you owe this person. You're going to put it out. Right. And let's just leave it at that. If you think somebody who is, just understand, when you're Harvey Weinstein's right hand, you have a lot of leverage on a lot of people. Certain things that people shouldn't know. Right. And then that's leverage to get your show made. Even if it's not made properly or with enough money, that's leverage. And we'll just leave it at that.
What do you think? Do you think that you being vocal about a lot of this stuff has had any sort of effect on your place in Hollywood? Like, I mean, you speaking out against like Star Wars in the way that you might, or supporting it, or like, I mean, even speaking up against Headland, or is this something that you think is ubiquitous?
No, I mean, I've been around 23 years. I've already made my enemies. I mean, people know who I am. I've already made my enemies long ago. I mean, I'm a Muslim guy, and I've been very open about the fact that Hollywood doesn't like Islam. For all people like Hollywood is woke, there's this weird, bizarre thing amongst a lot of the right-wing YouTubers are like, Hollywood loves Islam. I'm like, really? Not my experience of it. It's like literally like Hollywood will embrace every minority except this one, right? Because they view Muslims as a threat for 2 reasons. One is they view Islam as a very stubbornly conservative religion that doesn't adjust to the pro LGBTQ, pro this, pro where the narratives that Hollywood is pushing. It's not adjusting to it. It's like, no, we're not going to support any of that. We're not. We're the men and women are going to pray separately in our mosques. And we're just going to do things like that way. You don't like it, it's your problem. We don't change our religion. So it's seen as a very stubborn religion that's refusing to go along with the modern culture Hollywood wants to promote, number one. And so number two, it's, as we're seeing with world events right now, Muslims are seen as a threat to Israel, which is an emotional trigger point for a lot of people in Hollywood. A lot of people in Hollywood identify with Israel. They may have never been there. I've been there twice. I've been to Israel and Palestine. I've been to the West Bank. I've been all over. I've been to Jaffa. I've been to Tel Aviv. I've been to Herzliya. I've been all over, right? I've seen it. My opinions about that situation are based on what I saw with my own eyes twice, right? So I've got some strong opinions, right? But Hollywood has lots of opinions based on not knowing anything, but feeling an affinity for that country. And so Muslims are seen as a threat to that. And I've been very publicly about who I am, and that has denied me work. I know people have called. I've gotten calls from people who said, man, I'm so sorry, we were about to give you that offer, but we got a call saying that guy is an Islamist fanatic. Don't let him in. I mean, I've had those phone calls where people called to apologize to me that they couldn't offer me the job because somebody called.
And so, I mean, an Islamist fanatic?
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually not an Islamist. I'm a Sufi. Anyone who knows anything about me, I'm a Sufi, which you might even call like the wacky liberal Muslims, but we're mystics. Believe, right. God is everywhere. The face of God is everywhere. And the purpose of religion is to see the divine in all things. I mean, we're pretty on the progressive side of Islam, as far as you can go. And, right. but it's all black and white to these people. But yeah, I've had people put me in that box, right? And I've been denied work. So my current, talking about Leslie Headland, that's the least problem I've got. I mean, they're like, oh, whatever. I mean, we're already not going to hire this guy because he's persona non grata for these other reasons. And so, right. And those who want to hire me will hire me. I've still had a career. I've not always had the career I wanted, and I have been denied work. I have been denied major projects that I thought I had in the bag, and then I didn't get. And it was later. Then the thing with Hollywood is it's a very small town. People will tell me, I'm sorry, Cameron, this happened and you were pushed out of the running because some people didn't want you specifically and for these reasons. And people tell you. And so I'm like, it's not like, oh, you're paranoid. I mean, people sit down and say to me, that's what happened here. I'm so sorry, man, because they want to keep a relationship with you because they're your friends and they don't want you to be upset with them that the job didn't work out. So they'll tell you what happened.
It's wild to think that that Hollywood is a small town, because I think people who are not in Hollywood think it's this like giant, I think to some extent, like you said, there's the club, and if you're not in the club, but otherwise, like, you can just get lost in this sea of people, which is probably true, but I never thought of it as like, that.
Oh, it is an incestuously small town. We consistently say amongst ourselves, Hollywood is small because everyone knows everybody. And whatever you say, gossip about them will eventually get back to that person within a week, right? I mean, no matter who it is. So Leslie Headland knows who I am. She knows I'm talking smack about her.
Yeah.
She heard about it the first moment I did on some YouTube channel, right? And she's got her own problems to deal with. So she doesn't care, right? So, but it is a very incestuously small town. Everyone knows everyone, and everyone is like competing with each other, and they're all backbiting each other, and they're all gossiping, and everyone hears it. That's why I hear stuff. That's why other people hear stuff about me. So I am just open about it because I'm like, well, yeah, I know you already know, so I'm just gonna say it.
That's why I've always been a fairly creative person myself, and I have a few things that I've written that are they're just taking up space on my hard drive at this point because I don't know if I want to contribute to that culture of like, hey, I got this cool story, but then everyone's just like clawing over each other to get like what they think is theirs. You know what I mean? And I don't know if I'm ready to, like, I have a hard time like selling people on a new roof, like I don't want to pull someone's pants down over like,
So you have integrity, Tom? You have integrity?
I like to think so. And that's where I hate the fact that it is. I mean, so much good stuff comes out of Hollywood, but I feel like in order to get that, there was so many people like squished down in all that. So I don't know. I mean,
that's any power. That's any power environment. I mean, Washington D.C. is like this. Hollywood and Washington D.C. are the same thing. People often joke that Washington D.C. is Hollywood with ugly people, or Hollywood is Washington D.C. with attractive people, and it's true. It's the same genre because one of the things that again, my Hollywood friends are all still very much believe in the system and politics because they're all part of it, right? And I, as an observer of this system, has never been allowed to really be, one of them. They don't want me as one of them. They might work with me, but I'm never going to be one of them. And I don't really, like you, I don't want to be one of them. But I came to understand Washington, D.C. and Hollywood the same in a very literal way. People argue about the president of the United States. The president of the United States is just an actor reading a script.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is, who wrote the script? Who paid his campaign? Who gave him the script to read, right? Who's telling him these are his positions, right? That's, people don't understand that. Once you understand that the president of the United States is just an actor, and if you go off script, you end up like JFK or Nixon. They take care of it, right? We all know the many reasons why JFK, people believe he was taken out, right? Nixon, one of the greatest movies ever made is Oliver Stone's Nixon. So in one of my top 5, I've worked with Oliver Stone actually. So I told this to Oliver directly. I told him that Nixon is, I think, greater than JFK, which people consider his greatest movie. I think Nixon is better. People, if you haven't seen it, it's worth watching. And Anthony Hopkins is genius portraying Nixon. And people think Oliver Stone is a conspiracy theorist, a leftist, whatever, and that but he has a very sympathetic portrayal of Nixon because he shows, which I think is historically accurate, because I'm actually obsessed with Nixon. I've read a lot about him, including have some about his books that he wrote. His books are fascinating, right? Is that Nixon he was elected to be a right-wing guy, and he turned out to be a liberal. It created the Environmental Protection Agency. He started doing busing to bring people of races together in schools. All this stuff was him. And there's a great scene, he started, he took the US dollar off the gold standard, all these things that were liberal. He was the last liberal Republican. He wasn't a conservative. He just was anti-communist. So he sounded like a conservative. And that was his angle to get to the presidency. The moment he got to presidency, he wanted, we talked about, having, in the last few years, people are talking about doing like a minimum income. That's Nixon's idea. Nixon proposed that in 1970.
Yeah.
A minimum standard income for the whole country, that everyone should have, not just a minimum wage, that everyone should have. He proposed that. Nixon came up with the idea. So Nixon was actually pretty left, right? And there's a great scene in Oliver Stone's movie where Larry Hagman plays like one of his wealthy Texas backers, and he's sitting with him and he's like, "What the hell are you doing? We didn't put you in office to do any of this crap," right? And you're ending the war like he ended the war. Like we think of Nixon as a warmonger. He ended the Vietnam War. He ended the draft. He did all those things, right? And he's like, and Nixon is like, "You didn't put me in power. The American people did." And Larry Hagman's like, "Well, we'll take care of that. We're going to show you who's in power." And then he's out, right? Because he didn't, the worst thing Nixon could have done was end the Vietnam War and end the draft because people were making money on it.
Right.
Right after he does that, guess what? Watergate, he's out.
Right.
He's out. They take care of it. So you have to be, when you're in Hollywood, if you're awake, most people in Hollywood aren't awake because they're still arguing about Biden versus Trump, and they just don't grasp that these are actors. It's funny because you're working in a system where all my screenwriter friends are writing scripts for actors to say things they don't believe in, but they have to play the role.
Right. And that is really one of the more bizarre things about actors is like, you look at these people, we uphold some of these people as like the greats of history, like, oh, this guy, like he can portray anyone, but like these are normal people. They have extraordinary skill to like make you believe they're someone they are not, but at the end of the day, they're just like you and me in that they're just regular people, and they don't really have any power. They have power over our emotions when we see them.
Well, they're spokesmen, right? They're spokesmen for an idea, whether it's in the movie or whether it's their politics. That's when people resent their politics. I'm like, dude, somebody's telling them to say that.
Yeah. Well, it's weird now because you would almost like, I don't even know if that's really how much it's happening with the like if you have a lot of liberals playing conservatives. I think the last one I always think of what's his name from Parks and Rec. Ron Swanson, but I can't even think of his real name. But he, he's liberal. He's talked about it, but he plays a bleeding heart like conservative, or he's a total conservative in that show. But he's not that way.
He's playing a role. He's a good actor, right? And you've got to play that, right? I mean, a good actor like Jamie Lee Curtis is the scream queen, right? We all watch her and start off in Halloween, and we love her. And Jamie Lee Curtis is very vocally anti-gun. But she's out there in the last Hollywood movie, blasting everything, blasting at Michael Myers. I mean, she's playing a role. That's her job.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
On my show, Sleeper Cell, Odette Fair brilliant actor. By the way, I recently he was the guy, the handsome, Egyptian dude in The Mummy. Remember in The Mummy, he played like the Egyptian magi, right? He's a great guy. He's Israeli, and we became friends on that show. And he is very passionately anti-war. He was an IDF soldier in Gaza in the days of Gaza, before the current events, and he saw horrible things that really disturbed him deeply. And he said, I grew up my whole life. Gaza is, an hour drive away from me, and I didn't know that this was a situation. Then I participated in the situation, and it overwhelmed him. And he came out of that, and he left Israel. He's like, I'm anti-war based on what happened. Like a lot of people, when they go through war, become anti-war. I mean, Eisenhower was, right? And so, and he's like, I hate guns. I hate war. I hate violence. And he was deeply philosophically committed to anti-war, anti-violence. He played the head terrorist on our show. And he did a brilliant job as being a ruthless, murderous, gun-wielding, torturing killer. That's not who he is.
Yeah.
180 degrees is opposite of who he is. But he's a good actor.
Yep. No, it's like I said, it's these people play someone, they're convincing you someone else, and they're reading a script. They're part of a system. So I do want to like kind of touch on like you being a Muslim in Hollywood. Like
sure, and then I've got about 10 minutes, and I have to start winding down. So forgive me.
Yeah, of course. Really, like so, like I led off with, your discussions with Carrie Smith about religion were just really awesome, because I was raised in a Catholic church. So it was pretty strict for a while. Then I sort of like moved away from it because of that. But now I find, being 38, I have 2 kids, married, like I find myself being more like open to the idea of, not necessarily religion, but like understanding why people gravitate to those teachings and what, so.
Well, I'll answer that. I mean, so we talk about being Homo sapiens. We're not Homo sapiens. We're Homo religioso. Where human beings are programmed to need religion. It is fundamental to our psychological framework as a survival instinct. I'm a believer. I'm a religious person, right? But there's a wonderful book called "Religion Is Not About God." You can find it on Amazon. It's by an anthropologist, and the entire book's analysis. Because the person who wrote the book, the scholar, said, I'm not going to try to answer what religion is true or not true. I'm not an atheist. I'm simply saying I'm going to analyze the 5 major religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. I'm going to analyze those 5 religions from a historical, anthropological perspective and see, why do people believe in them? Just what is the practical purpose it serves in their lives? And he consistently found what it does is it provides religions are the most effective means of supporting reproduction. That was his conclusion. Religion is a human biological need to order the universe in a paradigm to promote reproduction. Animals don't need it because animals instinctively reproduce without any issue, right? Whereas human beings, we can become monks. We have all kinds of pathological complexities of the developed, upper lobes of our brain now, that we actually need religion to restore us to our natural state, which is in touch with nature and reality and reproduction. And he said that's its social purpose. And I believe that. Right. So I don't think there's any way to pull it out. Even the people that say they're atheists, they have a God, and usually a terrible God. It's usually materialism. It's usually their ego. It's usually very ugly things, but they got something they ain't going to let go of, that they worship. I mean, you see it in Hollywood all the time. These people, they don't believe in anything, but they worship money. They worship their own arrogance. It's the most horrible God you can have, but they have it.
So it's essentially a purpose. All these religions provide people with a direction, purpose that they otherwise might not have, or at least creates a stable structure underneath.
Yeah, and it gives meaning and explains the fundamental things, death, consciousness, is there an afterlife? People, that's a profound human question, and the rational mind can't answer that question. It can't find an answer. And it's too important a question to be left unanswered. And so most people find the answer through religion.
Yeah, I mean, it just fascinates me. There's so many like great stories out there. And I know people, like some will say, like, and maybe even yourself, like, well, these things happened. These are, important events in my past. And like, to me, they're still stories, but it doesn't mean that they didn't happen. It's just, that's how I'm thinking of them.
Are you talking about like religious stories like Bible or Quran or so think of I use the word, I was a religion major in college, so I'm using the academic word myth. And when I say myth, like these are myths, I'm not saying myth as in they didn't happen. I'm not saying myths as in they're false stories, that they're made up imaginary stories. And myth is not used that way in religious study of religion. Myth means they're a story that gives human beings purpose and meaning. All right.
Yes.
You know, and that doesn't mean they're not. I mean, there are myths that are not religious that are true, like the idea of the founding fathers being these, you know, idealistic men fighting the empire and imagining a republic of freedom. And that sounds like Star Wars, right? That's Star Wars. That George Washington stood up, you know, he could have been an emperor, he doesn't take it. Ben Franklin was this, and Jefferson. But that's all true. Right. It's just our myth, you know, it's our Star Wars myth, but it's all historically true, but it's meaningful to us.
Yeah, it's and I like I said, I'm not old, but being older than I was 10 years ago, let's say, I have found just more truth and meaning in this stuff and how it might help me, again, find that purpose and way forward in a life. Because I think you're right. I think there was times when I wouldn't necessarily have ever called myself atheist, but certainly agnostic. But finding
agnostic is the starting of the journey. It's like, I don't know. That's the correct thing. I don't know. I mean, you don't know. Faith is the bridge over I don't know, right? It's that moment in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where he's standing at the chasm and he has to believe there's a bridge. He can't see a bridge, so he steps into the chasm where he could die, and there's a bridge that's just hidden by the optics of it, right? So that's what faith is. Faith is the bridge over the chasm. You know, agnosticism is I don't know what's bad. Atheism is claiming that there's no chasm. Right. I mean, that's not really there's no chasm. That's just kind of a silly point, right? You know, so it's agnosticism at least is the beginning of a quest.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm glad I never turned, because I think at one point I wanted to say that I was an atheist, but there was always too much of a question, and I always looked at my friends as if like, how could you not think maybe, you know, all these brilliant, beautiful stories that just that help guide people in really good ways. Like, yeah, there's some pretty awful stories at times, and there's awful people in the world, but like the potential, the potential that humans have for good, like totally outweighs the bad. No, don't get me wrong. I acknowledge the bad that's done.
Yeah, but whatever. I mean, but even with the bad, when people start saying religion's a cause of all war, blah, 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 I'm like, you know what? Why don't you say that to Mao, who killed 60 million people in his effort to eradicate religion? I've worked in Beijing. I saw what he did to that beautiful society. I studied Taoism. It's my study of religion. I love Taoism. Great respect for it. I went there. I saw how he destroyed the Taoist temples. These were peaceful people not bothering anybody. And Mao wiped them out because he was anti-religion. He was going to save mankind from religion. He starved the country to death. I mean, that guy was a madman. And so, but he killed more people than I think if you put all the religion wars to go in history, he killed more people in 10 years than all of them did, over thousands. So, I mean, and again, what was his religion? His religion was his made up economic ideology that he just made up and went with it. And there was no morality to it. So he could do whatever the hell he wanted. Right. Same with Pol Pot. So, it's just, so you got all these guys, right? And so that whole thing, religion is the cause of blah, blah, blah. Religion is in my opinion, is very much proven by history, in my opinion, is the organizing principle of humanity, right? Societies that have a strong religious belief work better than societies that do not, because they give people the structure that they need. They keep families working together. They promote reproduction. And our secular society doesn't promote reproduction. And just the most recent information just came out a few days ago that Americans demographically are not reproducing at all. We're going to cease to exist.
Saw that.
In about 3 generations, right? Except who's going to replace us? It's going to be religious cultures like Latinos, who are devout Catholics for the most part, African Americans, Muslims, right? People who take their religion seriously are going to replace all these secular rationalists.
Yeah,
they just are not having children. So that's just what's going to happen. And that's it. And that's reality.
It's wild because the nihilism I see taking over, and I see someone in chat just mention it as I say it, like nihilism it's really sad to see that that's what a lot of what's being pushed. I think in the culture, not necessarily Hollywood, but in other parts of the culture, is like, who cares? It doesn't matter. And I had a great conversation with my friend last week, Aldous, who said, "You want to win the culture war? Breed these people out of existence.
Correct.
Have kids, raise great families. Write down like 4 or 5 values that you hold on to. Find a partner that
shares those values, yeah.
that shares those values, and go."
Your friend is right, and that's how it's going to be, whether people plan it or not. And there are people who are like planning. I'm going to have my beautiful 6 children. They're planning it out. They're thinking it out. Right? It's not a lot of them. Most people are just like, well, I'm part of this religion that promotes, it's good to have a big family. God said, be fruitful, multiply. Muslims have lots of kids, right? Catholics have lots of kids. We don't think about it. There's no strategy in it, right? And so we're just going to do it because it's already ingrained in the system, right? And I see some arguments over religion in the chat. I'm not going to get into those arguments. I'm just explaining its social purpose. You can think it's all myth. You can think it's all made up. Who cares? It works, and it's winning. Yeah. That's all that matters. And on that note, I ask your forgiveness because I actually have to go do my sunset prayer before the last light disappears. I have 5 minutes to do it. And so I'm going to go do it. So I want to thank you for bringing me on here. What I would love is if people, I'm going to quickly throw in my Patreon into the chat, right? Yeah. And so people, I know a lot of people from my Patreon are here, but there's people I haven't seen before who are members of your channel. And I would love it if people could come onto my Patreon. It's worth the $5. I think the members of chat who are Patreon members will say it's one of the most interesting things that's out there in the system. So I'm putting it in there right now.
Yeah, please do. And then those who are listening afterwards on Spotify, please, I'll drop it in the show notes. You can look at it there and check out Kamran on. Yeah,
it's Patreon / my name, KamranPasha.com. So so Patreon.com / KamranPasha. So thank you. Yes, Tom.
Real quick, will you just drop it in the private chat? I don't think it came through on the YouTube chat, but just in case.
Oh, I did throw it I thought it saw it, but I'm throwing it into private chat.
Oh, there it is. I see it. Okay, perfect.
All right, now I'm literally got 3 minutes to do my prayer, which takes 3 minutes. I'm going to go. So you might want to stick around to just say farewell and maybe talk to some people in the chat. Absolutely. So everyone stick around here. I got to go do this. So, whether, this is working for me, so I'm going to go do it. All right, guys.
Thanks, Kamran.
I hope I can come back on again in the future, Tom. God bless.
Absolutely.
All right?
Take it easy.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, guys. This was a great episode with Kamran. I want to thank him for joining, and of course, I want to thank all of you guys. It's always awesome to see a crowd when I have guests on. It's always a nice talk. I hope you guys are enjoying these episodes where I have one-on-one conversations with people that I admire, people I want to know more about, and people I want you guys to know. It's really easy, I think, sometimes to get information on who people are from other sources. I hope I do a fairly good job at illustrating who people are and letting them explain for themselves. It's been awesome, and I respect Kamran for taking the time to join me tonight and say his piece on everything. I look forward to maybe looking back at Miss Marvel and seeing if it was an even better show. Knights, thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's very nice to hear. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. If you're coming over from Pasha's channel, I would love for you to subscribe. Check out my future content. I do a lot of one-on-one interviews with people, and I do a Wednesday night show at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time. That's 7:30 p.m. Pacific, and where we just talk about pop culture, entertainment, and just generally have a good time. So thank you so much. We'll see everybody on Thursday. Thursday, we're going to be sitting down with Gary from Nerdrotic and talking about his rise to fame over the past few years and where he's been in his life. So we love to see it. Thank you, King. Thank you, Knights. Thank you, Krabby Patty, Future Boy. Mike loves cats. We had a lot of people here tonight. Shanatsky. We'll see you guys next time. Appreciate y'all being cool. Peace.